we ready? More people? Are you ready? Yeah. How many people never look to sit in the front row? What's that about?
Comes from school.
When I was in school, I sat on the front row. Well, not the front row, but pretty close to the front row. Oh, of course, actually, most of the time, I was lucky. I went to a smaller kind of school. So most of the time, the tables were arranged in sort of a circle around the teacher. So you had no choice but to be on the front row. Everybody was on the front row. So, uh, hmm. When your teacher's old, it's not a bad plan to sit on the front row if you want me to be able to understand a word you're saying. The closer your mouth is to my face. Oh, okay. Try to follow your breath for a few minutes, allowing yourself to nourish yourself with your breath. Breathe out any of the tension in your body. If you like to do 9-round breathing, you can do that. And this helps us bring our mind to the present, to what we're experiencing right now, the sounds, the body sensations. Letting go of that need to hurry to the next thing. Like accepting your choice or your decision to come here today and then allowing yourself to be here. And then bringing to mind the reason you decided to come today. And setting a good intention to use the time well. And then combining it with the wish that it not just benefit yourself, but that it ripples out to benefit those around you. So we'll start with the four measurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And then refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So this is the day that a lot of the world celebrates the resurrection of the person who did the best bodhisattva deed, the most Tonglen I've ever seen, that taking and giving, the willingness to take on all the sins of all beings in order, to benefit us, to die for that purpose. I'm not there yet. So but it really, to me, shows how, most of the world religions, share, the same support of our good qualities, that this willingness to take on some pain for the sake of somebody else not having it, or the sake of, even the reverse, allowing your child to feel some pain in order to not to get really sick later. It can't be, I don't know, I'm not a parent, but I know what I was like as a child when we went to the doctor for shots. I've been known to hide behind doors. I did not like them. And they always took blood from me. And I didn't like that at all. Back in the razor blade days. So, to insist that the child get it anyway, it's got to be quite the challenge. So, these are the ways in which we show our concern for others, that we're willing to do what is not popular in order to, be a good parent, be a good teacher, be a good, all these different things, roles we play in our lives, teacher. So, but fortunately, most of our good qualities don't hurt us to implement. Raziel, you look like you have doubt.
No, I'm thinking about what you're saying.
I'm just kidding. So what do you think? Are you hurt when you practice patience?
Yeah.
In what way?
You said in one teaching that patience just means the tolerance of suffering.
It is about accepting the suffering that arises in your mind without the wish to retaliate.
It just feels like a very physical feeling when I'm like tolerating, like my
Because
stuff.
you're not, might not be accepting it. You know, I mean, this is the thing we need to understand, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I think patients, I mean, as someone who's infamous for not really being a great practitioner or patient, you know, this accepting of suffering without any desire to retaliate for the suffering. First of all, when you really think about that, what does that imply the other person's doing to you?
Some kind of harm.
Some kind of harm. Is it true? Is most of the time when we feel called upon to practice patience, is anybody trying to harm us? Most of the time. No.
If you believe it,
Huh?
if you believe it, you can feel like that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the, but the point is, we don't even get to practice patience very often because the reality is, what is causing our suffering in most of the circumstances where we think we're practicing patience?
We are the way we think.
And what are we thinking?
I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
Yeah, me. How dare I have to wait? How can, what's, whatever it is, I don't know, whatever your button is for having to, like, where you feel like, come on, can't this go faster? Or do I have to explain this again? It's our sense of our self-centeredness that's harming us, not what the other person's doing. The other person's probably not even thinking about us at all because they're worried about themselves, or they're doing, they have no clue, because they don't see us as the center of their universe. So that's it. So it's very interesting how important it is if we want to develop the action of patience, to really understand that most of the time we don't even have that, the person we have to be patient with is ourselves. Okay, all right, I'm not getting what I want. All right, can I accept that and tolerate it and not retaliate against this other person's not causing me harm at all? It's very interesting, but it gets at this point, that this 7-point mind training is talking about is that we need to banish the one to blame for everything. Most of our suffering we create due to our self-centered orientation, that we see everything from the point of view of what we want and what we don't like, what our preferences are. And so we're constantly rubbing against what's happening in the world, because it doesn't necessarily suit us. And we can end that suffering right away with effort.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, it is easier said than done. But the point is, when that disturbed mind that arises, kind of like that, you realize you're just getting fed up with the situation, that you're causing your own suffering, and that perhaps are you stretched out enough? You're distracting, and it's not beneficial to point your feet at holy objects. Just letting you in on that. So it's really challenging to accept responsibility for the suffering we create for ourselves. But that's where we have so much power. If we can just recognize, oh, I'm creating this drama in my own head, and have counter arguments against it. You know, like for me, it's really easy for me to just kind of go, oh, really? Who do you think you're the center of the universe? You know, so you have to wait, big deal. Or you have to, you know, whatever, or you're going to have to fill this form out again, or you're going to have to do whatever, or the computer crashes and you have to, you know, fill out all kinds of forms again. And, you know, you just kind of, you know, just, it's this understanding that in life, what is happening, we have no control over. We can't control when the computer crashes. We can't control when we have flat tires. We can't control when we don't get what we like to eat. We can't control, you know, there are all sorts of things, but we try really hard to control all those things.
Sometimes we can turn that into an opportunity to be kind, let somebody else go in front of us.
Yep, that's one way to deal with it. But we want to really deal with the self-cherishing mind, the mind that says, I think what I want is the most important thing. And we need to spot it in ourselves, you know, to be able to kind of go, look what I'm doing. Look what I'm thinking. I'm really trying to get exactly what I want, you know, and I think the whole world should cooperate with that. And we make demands, you know, we'll express irritation, you know, we'll express some sort of like, you know, we'll express our frustration. We're rude to people who are serving us. Maybe you're not. But the point is, this kind of suffering, you know, so whenever we feel this, I don't know, for me, it's sort of like that sigh. I caught every red light this morning, you know, that sort of sigh, you know, that's just my clear sign. Oh, you're not getting what you want, you know, get over it. You know, so it's, but the more we can just relax into whatever's happening and accept that this is what's happening, and how I respond to what's happening is going to determine this level of peace of mind I have. And that's under my, you know, that's under my purview. So that's really a way of empowering ourselves to make our life better every day, you know. What kind of attitudes do we have that think that we're under the illusion or the delusion that it really isn't, it isn't me.
When somebody irritates me,
It's really them.
if they would just stop.
If they would just stop, yes. How true is that? And of course, if we allow ourselves to think that out loud in our minds, sort of, you know, that we can, so we hear it in our minds, we don't have to broadcast it, you know, how childish does it sound?
Everybody was laughing.
Yes. That just means we can relate.
That's even more irritating.
Oh, well, oh, well.
I've been noticing about the judgmental mind.
Yes.
But the more that I let that mind grow in me, the more complicated this situation about acceptance is. Because if I'm driving, for example, if I'm watching how other people are driving and I'm criticizing, I'm creating that habit of whatever I'm doing, I'm observing the environment and I'm criticizing what's going on. So it's somebody does something I don't like, things don't go smooth. I'm ready to criticize and be upset with that.
And we've already started.
Yeah.
You know, you're ahead of the game. You know, nothing's happened yet and you're already criticizing.
Just to kind of leverage on what you shared, actually, the source of this is my Facebook Buddhism quote section. And it said that people were talking to Buddha and asking them, oh, my employer upset me at work, my spouse upset me. And he says, no, you're upset above.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't know if that's true or not, but I was like, that resonated. I said, no, I need to work on myself, not being upset, which is the whole self cherishing and the work, you're the center of the universe, etc.
Yeah,
Not
well,
being
that's the
upset.
thing. So when we're able to recognize, like you are, that, okay, the fact that I am prepping myself to be, you know, even more, you know, quick, judgmental type mind by the fact that you're noticing everybody and criticizing everybody, you know, what could you do instead?
Recognize.
Yeah, but what could you do instead? So you recognize, and then what is your choices?
I usually ask myself when I'm irritated, how does that feel? And not usually, when I have the presence of mind to do it, I'll ask myself, does that feel good? And when I realize that it doesn't, stop.
Okay, well, how about more in depth than that? Well, we know you've been reading Buddhist quotes, yeah. So
First is recognizing that there is that habit.
yes,
And when I catch that my mind is going towards that, kind of like stop the thought.
but also can we see why? So one of the things we can do is think about why is it a bad habit? One is that you identify that it makes you very quick. As soon as something does get in your way, you know, it sparks anger, variation of it. Okay, so that's one reason not to do it. Another reason not to do it is because it doesn't actually feel good to be doing it.
I guess also the more I practice it, the more I'm gonna do it. I'm
Yes.
practicing it.
Yeah, it's becoming a stronger and stronger habit, makes it harder and harder to interrupt, you know. But how about like our perspective of others? What is it doing to our perspective of others?
Losing empathy for others that might be in a similar situation.
We're trashing them. This constant judging is just like this, like, oh, like I'm king of the universe and I know what a selfish, bad driver you are.
You should know better.
And you should know better. And don't you realize you're endangering everybody's life on the road? We won't mention that I'm one of those, but you know, that kind of thing. So we need to also see that these kinds of habits of judging and criticizing people or noticing everything they're doing wrong, how that affects our mind about our opinion of other sentient beings.
Last, I had a little anecdote. I was in line on a flight, and there's like 80 people behind me, and I was in a hurry. And there was like 2 or 3 people who were really slow. I'm like, oh my God, don't they have their stuff together? They're holding the line up. I got to the line and I forgot my measuring, and I was like 13 pounds overweight. And I got to stop the whole line. I could feel at least my perception of like daggers in the back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have been more patient. Now it's my turn. And I'm the train wreck worse than everyone.
Well, and this is the thing. If we want kindness, this is not how you create it. You know, we don't, you know, if we practice kindness, because I tell you, in those moments, it is so wonderful when the person helping us, you know, is relaxed and kind of like not worried about the fact that this is their job, you know, okay, you're overweight, we have to fix that, you know, and they're not mad at you for not having a luggage weigher thingy, you know, or not knowing what the weight limit was or whatever it is. But, you know, so, but how likely are we to be that kind person if what we practice is constant criticism of others? You've set the bar pretty low for yourself, you know? And so we really want to recognize that That it's, we don't want to just go, well, it doesn't feel good to me. We want to see what the ramifications are. What's the consequence of practicing that habit? To look far-sighted into, first of all, are you likely, wherever you're driving to, are you going to carry that same energy? You might not be just immediately criticizing everybody you're working with or everybody, blah, blah, blah. But that agitated energy is not restful. So we show up to wherever we're going in a kind of, disgusted state. So you're missing an opportunity to take care of your mind so that whatever happens next, you've got a good platform for it. Just like you've noticed that the opposite happens when you're practicing the criticism, that is creating that platform for getting angry when it escalates. So we really want to think about okay, this is something, I don't like how it feels, it's distracting me from driving. You can come up with a whole list of things of just in the moment why it's not such a great idea to be distracted by that. You may think, oh, but I'm actually a better driver because I'm noticing all these idiot drivers, blah, 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 blah. But no, you're not. You're paying attention. This guy over there doing this. You're not paying attention to your side view mirrors and your rear view mirror and your da 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 da. Anyway. But then you want to go even further and understand what that habit of mind does to your opinion of others. And what are you trying to do? You don't care about your opinion of others? Think, fine, I can hate everybody in the world and be happy. Good luck with that. But, so fine. But if you really want to develop a mind that cares about others, that trusts others, that is happy to see others, not like the Twilight Zone guy with the library and the broken glasses, but, I'm always dating myself. So we need to see their consequences for these bad habits we have of mind, and we can choose whether we want to continue them or not. And it doesn't mean we get it. We don't do that. Of course, it's much more of a process than that. But if we don't do the analysis of it, we won't have as strong of a reason to interrupt it. And that could be helpful. So it's so like when you start to do it, you can go, okay, really, do I really want to think this badly about everybody else? Is everybody an idiot? Is blah blah blah. So we really want to have that at the ready. Now, meanwhile, we don't need to beat ourselves up. It's like you're just trying to have some constructive criticism of yourself, and go, okay, I've decided that I don't like how I feel when I do this. I've decided that, it's like I'm preparing myself for a fight. I've decided I don't like that, so I'm doing this because this, may help me avoid those other things I don't want. So it's as opposed to what an idiot I am. How could I not figure that out? So if you have a tendencies for self-loathing, you want to try to not practice. It's because it's the same mind. It's, loathing others and loathing yourself are all one style. It's the same mind. So we don't, it's important not to practice either. That makes sense.
Yes, it does.
What would I do without you, Jack? That was a really good example. Okay. So we've been talking about the 7-point mind training. So we're now at point 4. So the integrated practice of a single lifetime. There's a lot of meaning in that sentence. that partial sense, that phrase. You know, that we're trying to put all the pieces together. You know, so like in the example we just did, we were looking at not only, you know, what a negative state of mind does to us, but also what it does to our attitude towards others. You know, so we're trying to integrate our desire to develop loving kindness and compassion, you know, as well as our desire to just feel better through the day, you know, for ourselves. So that's integrating the practices. Okay, so in brief, which of course, that's only if you know what these are. The essence of the instruction is to train in the 5 powers. The 5 powers themselves are the great vehicles, precept on the transference of consciousness at the time of death. Cultivate these paths of practice. Okay, to train in the 5 powers. So this is the kind of practice. It's sort of a shorthand. Buddhist, or it's great for list. You know, oh yeah, I just need to remember the 3 poisons: aversion, anger, ignorance. You know, just need to well. So the 5 powers is a little quick list of how to act in your lifetime, so that at the time of death, you'll create the cause for a good rebirth. So they also have the 5 powers at the time of death, and these are the same kind of things, but they're in a different order. But since we're not on our deathbeds at this moment, I think it's better to just start with the ones that we do now. So the 5 powers are intention, creating merit, countering negativity, power prayer, which in this case is specifically meaning dedication, and becoming familiar, the power of familiarity or acquaintance, that everything gets easier with practice. So mindfulness means remembering. I mean, that's all the word really means. It just means you remember what you intended to remember. So in meditation, that means you try to remember the object of the meditation. And, you know, our daily life, it's like we were trying to remember, what do I want out of life? Do I want to be the fashion critic for the world? You know, do I want to be the one who always knows the answer? Do I want to be, you know, whatever it is? Or do I want to have friends and lovers and, you know, good relationships with strangers? You know, do I want to get along? Whatever it is, you know, you try to imagine yourself on your deathbed and think about, what are you going to care about? You know, what's going to give you comfort at that moment and what isn't? You know, and how many things you probably won't think of at all. You know, some of us might, you know, think about all our possessions, but most of us won't. You know, won't have much meaning. You might think, oh, I want to remember to give this to so and so. You know, yeah. But mostly we think about our relationships. You know, so we want to remember that today. That's, you know, that's what gives us meaning. So that we will, you know, will want to treat each other well. You know? So the power of intention is to think, this is what the teachings say: I will be careful not to give any opportunity for disturbing emotions to arise induced by my misconception of self. In my simple terms, misconception of self is thinking you are the center of the universe. But there's also the ignorance level where you are misunderstanding how the self exist. You know, but we can start with just that self-cherishing mind that thinks, you know, all about me. And I do everything from that reference point. You know, so why is being careful to not give rise to disturbing emotions the sort of the antidote here. What are disturbing emotions?
Jealousy?
Anxiety,
Hmm?
anxiety,
I didn't hear that again.
anxiety.
Anxiety,
Doubt?
doubt. Doubt's sort of a in between.
Discrimination,
Discrimination, meaning prejudice,
prejudice.
as opposed to discernment. Greed, we mentioned greed.
Fear?
Fear is also sort of like doubt. Fear is obviously a disturbing emotion, but it's all because a lot of fear is about self-preservation, and that's because we misunderstand how it exists. So, and so yes, it actually it fits the definition, because why do you think they call it disturbing emotion?
Is there disturbing?
Yeah, when they arise in your mind, the mind is no longer peaceful. So think about craving. The same kind of mind rises in the mind, you're not peaceful. Infatuation. It feels good, but is it a sane mind? You know? So it's not just like anger, those kinds of things. It's also, you're not just aversion. It's also when we're exaggerating the good qualities of things. Our attachments are, they also disturb the mind. They also can help people. So they don't have quite the same uh, demand for being corrected, except when you look at your own suffering, because then you can see where attachments and craving and things like that is a way. But we know that our impatience, our anger, our hatred, our greed, our selfishness, I don't know, I can't think of all the words, but you recognize them when they're there, hurt others, that they have that outward focus that is harmful. The strict definition of anger and hatred in Buddhism is that extreme mind that when it arises, you want to hurt the source of that feeling. So it goes beyond our frustration and patience. It's when you finally, like resentment can really get you there, to that kind of mind where you just want to hurt someone. So, we want to, so this is again that importance of looking at the long view. What happens if this mind keeps getting further and further out of control? Like prejudice. What happens when that mind gets out of control? So we want to, these are the think greed, same thing. What do we do with that mind when it gets out of control? And we have examples that we can draw from, so it's not that we can't judge action and say, wow, man, I really don't want to be that kind of person. That's how we think. But it's not, we don't really know about the person, but we do know about the action. We can see the effects of the actions. We may not know their motivation. It might be a Buddha and they're doing something that we can't foresee. But we can go, do I want to act like that? I'm not a Buddha, so I don't have any, big long-term plan there. So, in my short-term way, do I want to be like that? So we can see examples, in the world, and we can see, and like when you see someone who's enraged, you can tell it's not a good mind. It's an uncomfortable mind. It's a miserable mind. Yeah.
I was thinking like all these emotions that happen on our lives, the feelings and situations that go around during the day. It's almost like, let's say, like a bicycle wheel. and you have all these spokes, and the spokes are perfectly tuned, and everything is running well, you're calm, you're fine. But then if you identify with one of those spokes and it takes off a little bit and it's out of balance, the whole wheel is, and then the emotions and one thing brings up another, and then you start getting off track, and then you ruin your day because you let yourself be dragged by some specific emotion that happened during the day.
And what's happening there is that the hub is become self-centered. You know, when it goes astray, it's because our self-grasping mind is, you know, looking out for number one again. You know, and really wants this, you know, either in a good way, when we exaggerate the good qualities of something, we're it's that, ooh, I really like this and I want it permanently, which of course can't happen. So, you know, that tension that's there, but we really desire to find, you know, we'd love to find everything that makes us happy and gather all that and have it be permanent. You know, that perfect day with your partner, and you just set it on repeat. You know, it's like all the foods you like, you set it on. So say you can do that, and so you got everything just so you like it. What happened? We're
It doesn't
pretending you could
last.
actually do that.
Doesn't last.
Why?
Things
Why
are
not?
permanent. It just can't.
Well, we can't have it that way anyway. So that we're ignoring that part.
Yeah.
What's the first thing that can change? Think about relationships. What's the first thing that can change?
My perception. of
Yeah.
the person.
Yeah, your view. It's like, oh, I thought this person was so great. And now they're starting to grate. It's like, you know, we're not permanent, like you said. So even our desires change. What we like changes. The way we get bored, you know, and we can't keep up with our own desires. So following the mind of craving or desire is a ludicrous battle. Because it's just going to change. You know? Yep.
I was thinking that you were talking about when someone gets really upset, then it's sort of the mind of lost control. And if it's lost control, it's dangerous because it's unpredictable
You're unreliable. That mind is an unreliable mind.
and could do something that under different circumstances might not.
You know, I mean, I think it's this thing of that's what all disturbing emotions can do. They're unreliable minds. They're considered wrong consciousnesses. You're distorting something about reality. You know, you're exaggerating when you're really angry at a situation or a person or whatever. You're exaggerating the negative qualities of that situation. It's not a fact. You're lying to yourself. You've exaggerated something. It's a wrong consciousness. So it's unreliable. You don't want to depend on it. That's why when something like that arises, you want to go, okay, I'm not going to trust myself to make a decision right now because I'm under the influence of this, you know, unreliable, out of control mind. You know, fear does the same. Fear is not a great, I mean, fear is useful, you know, when when you go, oh, yes, I have to evacuate now, you know. But if you stay in that state of fear while you're evacuating, you may not be able to get yourself to do that because you may paralyze yourself in fear, or you may do something foolish about how to get out of the situation, you know. So we have to understand that these kinds of states, we want to shift from that state to a state that has wisdom in it, you know. And one easy way to do that, and I'm sure this is what happens to a lot of families, is the parents shift to, I need to get my children safe. You know, not, I'm not safe. so they can, that allow, they take the responsibility for this other being, and that allows them to have wisdom. They may not have the knowledge, but they'll do the best they can. So setting an intention in the morning, we've talked about it, you set an intention in the morning to, it's like what His Holiness says, if you can't be kind, at least do no harm. So we can get it down to very simple things, but then we can also get to some specifics. That's so easy for me to say. It's a tough word, specifics, where we think, okay, I'm having trouble with my patience. I'm not being impatient a lot with blah, blah, blah. I'm going to work on that today, and you set some intentions about that. I'll try to interrupt it. I'll try to recognize it before I've said anything, done anything of the harm. So that's if we're in the habit of setting intentions, and we're going to set intentions all day long. Oh, we've got a meeting. You set an intention before you walk into the meeting. You get home from work. You set an intention before you get out of the car to enter your home with a different attitude than perhaps after driving. So it's just, you just like people make plans and schedules and timers and reminders and da 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 da. This is your mind we're talking about. Take good care of it. Give yourself some help. If you need some tools, use some tools. And almost everybody needs tools. Because another thing that disturbing emotions do, it makes us forget everything else. So, all right. So the second power is the power of the seed of virtuous practice. In other words, you need to accumulate merit, which means you need to do good things like generosity, practicing ethics. So ethics is just, where you really consider whether whatever action or words you're going to say, do they fit your view of what is right? Not in the sense of I'm right, not that kind of right, but when you take yourself out of it, kind of right, where you're really able to kind of look like, oh, I may really want to do this, and I may even think that, I have the right opinion about this, but I need to listen to other people's points of view as well. Like before you go into a meeting or something, you need to think about, if you're bulldozing your way through, getting your perspective, are you doing it in an ethical manner, in a generous manner? You're the boss, that's a little harder, but it's even more important that you practice it. But practicing generosity. So that's like what Steve was saying earlier with the traffic, that you're kind, you let somebody else in. That's generosity of your time. When you pay for the person who doesn't have enough money in line in the grocery store, you do all those, those kinds of things. And then meditation's on this list. Sorry about that. So meditation is what helps center us to remember to do these things, and to remember the reasons why we want to do these things, and to give us a sort of a calm framework from which to begin. So it's like a reset button. And it can be walking meditation. It can, all kinds of things. I mean, it's just, a way where you take some time to not fill up your mind with music, with podcasts, with, I don't know, all the stuff with all the stories we got going on, where we actually try to just be. So we walk and we just experience the walk. When you see something beautiful, maybe you stop and take it in, you know. But if you're talking on your phone, if you're, listening to a podcast, if you're, I don't know, telling a story in your head about what you're going to be doing tomorrow, or that's not going to do it. No. I walk for exercise, so I listen to a podcast, you know. Sometimes the beauty of the day just takes over though, and I'm no longer listening to the podcast. I'm just experiencing the beautiful walk. Yeah. But it's just, I do other things for my mind. But I started with walking meditation. So so we want to do the things we know are positive, that reflect our positive abilities. We are generous, we are kind, we are patient. We're just not patient with everybody. All these kinds of things. We want to, when we see an opportunity to practice something like that, we want to take advantage of that opportunity. So first of all, we want to notice that it's there. If we're always looking at the negative stuff, we're not going to notice the opportunities for the good stuff. So that can be an intention for the day. Okay, I'm going to notice all the good stuff. Doesn't have to be great stuff. It's the good stuff. That's why we always joke about, when you wake up and you realize you're still a human being, that's a good start. Next life, maybe not so lucky. So having a sense of humor is very helpful. And then the power of countering negativity. So this is when you recognize, that something negative has arisen, your self-centered mind has arisen, whatever, and you really try to counter it with your reasoning, arguments, with interrupting your actions of speech and body, and then you store it up as something to reflect on later when you have more time, so that you keep giving yourself a stronger reason to stop these where you're really firm with yourself, like, I really want to be better at this. I'm not going to just let it slide again. And the power of prayer helps us with this. So one aspect of prayer is the dedication prayers we do at the end. So you set an intention at the beginning of something, and then at the end you dedicate any positive results that you may have accumulated to be of benefit to others. And that helps us do what?
So various good habits
In what way?
by practicing the habits in meditation.
What is the main practice, your main thing you're practicing with dedication?
Generosity.
Generosity. You're giving away your merits, the roots of virtue. And you're with the wish that it ripen for someone else as something good. This is where we have to remember karma. Our good actions yield positive results. So when we dedicate, we are taking those things we've accumulated and sharing them, giving them away. And what does that help us with?
Also self-cherishing.
Yeah, and it helps us counter self-cherishing by doing what? Just thinking about others. Just, I'm not the only one suffering here, so, we bring them to mind. We make the wish that our efforts here will benefit other people. Because we really don't, some people do, but most of us do not think about others much. Most of our mind, the thoughts in our mind have everything to do with us. Well, I mean, it might not be, like all the time, but I mean, it's getting our chores done, getting our work done, getting our blah, 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 whatever. But we really don't think about others much. And we can, if we recognize the link, like understanding that we set an intention in the morning, and if we include in that intention the hope to benefit others, then that then you can also use that when you're thinking, okay, I need a nap, so that I can wake up refreshed to benefit others. I need to go to the gym so I stay in shape, so I keep my health good, so I can benefit others. Benefiting your family, benefiting, you just keep enlarging it. So it's not just about you, it's just, you don't just go to the gym for you or because you can attract a partner that way or, whatever. It's about, that it's sort of like one of our responsibilities as a member of society is to take care of ourselves. That doesn't mean going around criticizing others who are not. That doesn't include, well, if you quit eating that junk, you'd be better off. It's about just taking care of yourself, and recognizing that the mind that criticizes others is harmful. It's harmful to you and it's harmful to others. Oh, so that's not taking care of yourself, because we need others. It's the number one thing we need is others. People live longer, they have relationships all through life. I don't mean partners, just relationships, This is, these things matter to us. We're interdependent. And like we've talked about many times in here, there is absolutely nothing you have, do, or whatever that doesn't depend on countless sentient beings. There's not a street you can walk on. Between the sidewalks and the curbs and the stoplights and the trees and the flowers and the houses, everything is created by other sentient beings. So we just, the clothes we're wearing, the sunscreen, my personal favorite accoutrement, everything. So, we need to, our life depends on this interdependence. And it's so much better if we like people.
That's true.
And to do that, we have to not practice the mind of always finding what's wrong with them. That doesn't buoy us up. It makes us feel like, it's us against everybody else. And they're all bad drivers. I can attest to that. I'm reaching that age where I'm becoming one of those. It's like, okay, my reflexes aren't as quick as they once were. I can't turn to be very, very slow at backing up out of parking spaces. But I mean, it's so, it's just like, oh, you mean other people? I remember the first time it occurred, I was really annoyed with a car that was in front of me that was belching out smoke and, the smell and da da da. And I'm thinking, and then, I had to own a car, it wasn't my parents' car anymore. I had to own a car, and it takes money to fix cars, and if you don't earn a lot of money, you can't afford to fix your car. And so, like, duh, light bulb. Oh, you mean not everybody has all the same resources that I have, or not that I have, my parents have. We need to take these things into account. We see people acting badly. We need to remember that not everybody has any tools, to help them work on their speech, or they're just having a bad day in that, or a bad moment, and we happen to catch a glimpse of it. But it's not who they are. So these things are ways to, so we really, the more we can expand this circle of acceptance, I'm flawed, you're flawed, we're all flawed. So, but that doesn't, all our friends are flawed, but we still like them, you know, most days. So,
For now.
yes, for now. So the power of prayer. So we dedicate to all these people who are helping us, you know, in all the varieties of ways. And it's kind of fun to sometimes see something and think, wow, someone made that. Someone had an idea for it and they made it. And it's helping me in this moment. You know, it's just kind of cool. There are a lot of clever things that have been invented. The other thing is purifying misdeed, is being able to look at your own day, you know, and you're making prayers to do better, you know, to have aspirational prayers for tomorrow. And so purification practice, where we reflect on our day and go, ooh, I said a few unkind things today, you know, and we genuinely regret it. What does that mean? What do we have to do to really mean that?
Try not to do it again.
That's resolve. But what does it mean to regret?
Take back,
I'm sorry,
want to take back.
you want to take it back? Yeah, you wish you hadn't said it. Why? Yeah, that's the reason we want to focus on. Not, ooh, I bet I looked bad. Which you probably did too. So, but yes, because whatever it was hurt somebody else or could have hurt someone else, you know, or was just unkind. You know, hurt doesn't have to be massive, you know, it's just, so we want to take that in. And then we want to think, and sometimes what we have to do is we have to think of a situation where it happened to us and how we felt. Because you really want to have it heartfelt. Ooh, I don't like how it feels when someone does that to me. I am really sorry I did that to them, you know. So that's the regret. It is not packing your suitcase with guilt. Regret is an action. Sorry I did that. You set a resolve. I'm going to try to not do that the next time. You know, we have to make our resolves realistic. Tomorrow, I'm going to try not to do that.
Isn't there an aspect of also doing violence to yourself, so to speak, with the unkind actions, not just the other people, but sometimes they'll say something like, oh geez, I really need that. Why did I say that?
Yeah, but that's all about you.
But there's not a, well, yeah, that's what I was getting at. Like there's like a self-reflection or like, God, why did I do that?
Yeah, but I mean, but it's still all about you. So what we're trying to do is shift from it being all about you to being you within the world. You think about what you've done to them. You know, not only I don't want to do that, but why? Because it harms someone else. Because it was unkind to someone else. Because when people are unkind to me, I know how it feels. So we have some evidence that this is not pleasant for someone else. You know?
Isn't there an aspect of like doing violence or being unkind to your own true Buddha nature? Like, well, we're all kind of good, the Buddha nature's in there. Not just other people, but also we're doing it to ourselves. Am I off on that?
No, of course. The biggest beneficiary of thinking of others is you. It's true.
Okay.
Your life will be better. Yeah.
That's a, for me personally, there's also a huge. I feel bad about doing something bad.
Right.
Or who harm.
Yeah, that's remorse or regret. Just yes.
Right.
But the reason why I said you don't need to pack a suitcase with guilt is we don't have to think we are a bad person for having done a negative action. You know, we were out of control due to a negative state of mind, which is usually self-centered, which is why you really don't want to just go, well, it's all about me again. And oh, so this is why we always want to practice this outward looking thing.
You know, I find that the more patient I am with myself,
Yeah.
the more patient I can be with others.
Yeah, that's different. That's practicing a mind you want to adopt. And we want to be kind to ourselves. We won't want to be a harsh critic to ourselves. We want to go, I'm just a human being doing the, best I can, and it's not so good today, and I want to resolve to do better. Because yes, I'll feel better, but also I'll do less harm. I'll have less regret.
Is that focusing on others, isn't that dualistic?
Jesus.
I
Please, I thought you gave your life for my sins. All right. Oh. We live in a dualistic. Conventional reality is dualistic. When we're talking about our behaviors in conventional reality, it's dualistic. So we don't need to go, we can, if you're advanced in the path and you're really working on understand reality as it is, you can understand there's really no difference between you and other. But that depends on really getting this dependent arising, this interdependence, this understanding that at the heart of it all is we suffer. If we cause others to suffer, they suffer, if they cause, that we're all in it together. That suffering exists because we're not using our Buddha nature. We're using this self-centered orientation to direct our actions of body, speech, and mind. And we need to, so that's why it's so important when we set intentions and we do dedications that we're thinking about, I'm giving it to others. That's why it's so emphasized in the Mahayana tradition to think about, don't forget, you want to do this for the benefit of others. So we don't forget, we want to do this for others, because benefiting others, cherishing others is the path to happiness. It's one wing's that wing. The other wing is the wisdom wing with realizing how things exist.
Then where does renunciation come in?
This wing that goes, there's no self-centeredness, and self-cherishing will never make me happy, ever, because there's nothing in samsara for me. Samsara is the nature of suffering. So, trying to get what you want is like, a lesson in self-punishment. It's just, it's not the method. Which is why we can see really unhappy people who you can't imagine being really unhappy people. They're attractive. They have all the wealth they could possibly need. They seem to have families and da 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 da. This, they don't have to worry about anything. Like I watched this clip of Richard Gere talking about Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And he was laughing about how, that he's a big shot. So if they want to go to some restaurant, he can get them a table. So you get, that you have all the power, all that stuff. You can have all those things and still have a dissatisfying life. There's a reason for that.
Did Richard Gere laugh at himself about that?
Oh, of course. Yeah. You should watch the clip. It's on the fbmt.org. He's talking about, it was a few days after Rinpoche, the aspect of dying. And so it's there. But I didn't realize he knew, I knew Richard Gere from his association with His Holiness and other teachers. And, but I didn't realize that he also had a relationship with Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So there's a clip just talking about Rinpoche. It's nice. It just was sent out last week. But and he was talking about how he never thought about himself.
I heard a quote from him, more or less. When he meets somebody new, he says to himself, how can I best help you be happy? Paraphrase.
And so so Richard Gere was one of the recipients of one of those meals where Rinpoche makes the offerings of the meal for 3 hours and you never actually eat. You know, he also was one of those recipients when they were passing a body of water where you stop and he blessed all the beans in the water. Traveling with Rinpoche was a interesting experience. But that's why we really want to think in terms. We want to emphasize the idea that we're not the center of the universe. You know, and thinking that we are the center of the universe causes us nothing but suffering. And we want to make everybody else, whoever we're with, the center of the universe, you know, in every moment. But that will help us develop the habits that will prove to be the satisfying habits of mind. And then meanwhile, we try to develop our wisdom so we can get out of samsara altogether, which is another long story. So purification, you want to develop regret for the misdeeds. The nice thing about doing this as a daily practice is that they don't stack up so high, you know? So you can just, okay, my speech wasn't so great. You think about those things, you really try to feel it, you know, then you accept a resolve to do it for a realistic length of time I will try not to do this the next time I meet this person, the next time I do this thing, tomorrow, whatever. The next few seconds, you know. A lot of people can only use seconds when they're thinking about politics. So, you know, I'm one of those people. Yeah, like, okay, that's as much of the news as I can watch tonight. What was the next thing? Oh, then you do a remedy. So there are practices in Buddhism where you recite mantras and things, or you can do any prayer, you know, but you're doing it for the person, you know, you're doing it for them to clean up your mind and to as a remedy for the harm you've caused. So apologies also count if they're appropriate, you know, doing service, you know, say, well, I'm going to go work at the food bank. I've been so miserly lately. I'm going to go do some work, you know, for a nonprofit. So that kind of thing, you know. And then what do I always add? We rejoice. Don't forget to look at all this good stuff you did, you know, all the restraint that perhaps you implemented, you know, all the kind words you said or thought, or, you know, or whatever deeds you did that were helpful. And the last power is the power of acquaintance. And that's just, you know, and mainly we want to acquaint ourselves with the mind of loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which is the mind wanting to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So having that, you know, if we have that desire, then our negative states of mind, especially those that are so clearly harmful to others, becomes a little easier to say, stop that. Don't go there. Don't do that. And then, you know, slowly, especially if you meditate on these things, you know, for why would you care? You know, what are the reasons why it'll be better if you really genuinely care about how you treat others? You know, you want to really imagine a world where everybody does that, you know, and would that be better? So that we can support ourselves when it's hard, when our gut reaction to something is super negative and we're taking it out on a person, not an action. You know, so you know, and if the more we practice, you know, like just like Steve was saying, you know, you walk into a room and you think, you know, this is a room full of friends. You know, I'm so glad these people are here, you know, that kind of thing. Or you just think you're open, you know, you see someone, you know, and you're just open. You're not going, how can I hide so they don't ask me for something? You know, you're not putting up barriers to embracing people. So that doesn't mean you're unwise, you know. But it's just that you just keep this in mind, so that your orientation about your actions is coming from this place of wanting to be of help, of use, of benefit, or nothing else, to just be kind. It's like when you read, stories from street people and they say, well, it'd be nice if someone smiled at you occasionally, and instead of just glared at you like you don't deserve to exist. That they really, they don't have to be big actions. They can just be, I recognize the humanity in you. We don't have to approve of the way they're living. That's not the point. But it helps you get into that mindset that says, oh, if this person, I would not want to have to live like this person's living. And so you have compassion for their situation. Even if they don't see it that way. We're working on our minds. All we can do is train our mind. We can't make someone else see our point of view. And it's not our job. We really aren't the center of the universe. It's not our job. Okay, so the 5 powers. Power of intention. The power of accumulating merit, doing good deeds. The power of countering negativity, interrupting our habits that are negative. The power of prayer, or dedication, purification practice. And then getting familiar with all of these things. Because the more we sit and think about these things, or walk and think about these things, the more likely we are to be able to implement. We won't forget. It helps us remember. That's why mindfulness, if you're, going through your day and, if you refresh your intention for that day, so you can remember, oh yeah, type it in your phone, make little reminders. Some of the little dings are very pleasant. So, but it's, if it feels silly, ask yourself, why is it silly to take care of your mind? Why is it silly to treat others well? Why is it silly to want to remind ourselves to treat others well? Because the effect of all of these things is to make ourselves happier. That's one of the side effects. Twist my arm. So. Question? That took me a long time to ask if there were any questions. Blah, 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 blah. I talk a lot. It's good, it's my job.
I have a question about Jesus and the resurrection.
You'll have to ask a Christian.
Okay, I don't know if it's a is it considered reincarnation?
You'll have to ask a Christian.
Okay.
I thought he just came, his body got up and walked out. So, I know that's how much I know. I don't know. So, yeah. So it's just, I think about all the time, all the beings that are willing to sacrifice for others. The firefighters, the, policemen, soldiers. It's just like unbelievable to me that what people are willing to do for the benefit of others. And it's just what they're able to put themselves into, what situations they're willing to put themselves into, and that the average person will do it in an emergency, in a just, they'll run out in the street, get a child out of the street, or a duck. It's a very wonderful thing. And that's our Buddha nature. I mean, it's not, it's us. It is why we all have the capacity to become enlightened, is that we have these qualities. And it's just that, we get ourselves bogged down in stuff that really doesn't matter to us in the long run. And it's because of this misunderstanding of how we exist. We really think that happiness comes from taking care of this self. Think about all the people out there who do unbelievable things to try to keep their youth when they're old. There's no mistaking that they're old. It's like, oh, you think you're going to not die? Is that what you think? It's just, it really is amusing. It's like in the past 2 years, I think, I've looked in the mirror going, oh, I'm starting to get that skin, on the neck, and like, oh, okay, yeah, and then I have a rationalization for noticing it, like, oh, I didn't realize it's just like there. Like, I swear it wasn't there last year. There it is, So your skin's losing the elasticity. In other areas, it seems to be gaining elasticity, All the women know what I mean. So, this is just weird. So,
We kind of be like my grandfather who lived to be about 86. He was almost never sick a day in his life.
well, how lucky.
Almost.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And those are the people I can see why they don't think they're going to die, but, most of us have had our fair share of things going wrong with the body, but it's just hilarious how we think sometimes when the Tibetan teachers come live in the West, they really revere their elders and their culture. I mean, I don't know if they do now because they've been exposed to the West. So, but so seeing women and men nowadays, cover their gray hair, it's like you're going, what's with that? It's something to celebrate, because they really respect their elders, and it's just like, oh yeah, not like that here. So it's not like that in Taiwan either. It's amazing how many people dye their hair jet black when they're in their 80s, 70s, 80s. So, but that's okay. But we really do worry about a lot of stuff that's just really not important, because relationships matter, and you can be aged and be beloved, but it has nothing to do with how you look. It's how you behave. So, okay, well, now we need to dedicate all this,
Rejoice.
and rejoice. Yes, first you rejoice, then you dedicate. Because rejoicing expands the power of the merit. It makes it bigger. And like what's really cool is you rejoice in everybody's good stuff, you get some of the merit of that. And if you rejoice in all the good stuff in the world from any being, including enlightened beings, you get some of that merit too. So that's called being happy about the goodness in the world. So it's a Lama Yeshe would call it the lazy person's way to accumulate merit. So, or the easy way to accumulate merit. And why would that be true?
You don't have to do anything except.
Well, that's why you're lazy. But why is it merit? Why is it accumulating good stuff? When you haven't done anything except rejoice in other people's merits.
You're recognizing the goodness.
Yep.
In people.
And yes, and you're happy about it. We're interdependent. Oh. Ah. Okay. Let's say our prayers. Page 240 something. 6, I think. Always guessing. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of our merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored up finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Then on page 244. And a land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Kenrezi, Kenzen Gyatso, please remain until the star ends. What page is it?
245.
Oh. Okay, so His Holiness recommended that we say the big say prayer for the reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who apparently is born and living in Nepal, but I don't think they know who he is yet. But I don't know anything, so. But anyway, this Lama Zopa Holiness recommended saying this prayer. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom. We're going to skip that middle line. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, to Lozandrapa at your feet I make request. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, to Lozandrapa at your feet I make request. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, to Lozandrapa at your feet I make request.